My beloved child, do not hurry past this moment. I have watched your heart carry questions that you have never spoken aloud. Questions you buried beneath quiet smiles. Questions you hid behind ordinary conversations. Questions that returned every night when the room became silent. Tonight, I ask you to remain until the very end. Not because I have come to frighten you, but because I have come to uncover something that has remained hidden for far too long. And child, the deepest truths are rarely hidden inside locked rooms. They are often hidden beneath assumptions. The story begins in an ordinary home. Nothing looked unusual. The same walls. The same family photographs. The same conversations around the table. The same daily routine. To everyone else, everything appeared peaceful. Yet beneath that ordinary surface, something had remained unspoken for years. Not because people hated one another. Because nobody had the courage to start an honest conversation. Child, silence has a strange power. When truth remains unspoken long enough, people begin treating silence as though it were truth itself. The person in this story never imagined anything was missing. They believed they knew their family's history. They believed they understood every important decision. They believed every chapter had already been told. Then one evening, while helping organize old family papers, they noticed a worn envelope tucked inside a forgotten box. It was not marked secret. It was not hidden behind a locked door. It had simply been overlooked. Sometimes, life does not hide the truth from us. We simply stop looking. The envelope contained old letters, old conversations preserved on paper, old decisions explained in careful handwriting. The person slowly unfolded the first page, not expecting anything unusual. But as they continued reading, one realization after another began forming. There were sacrifices they had never known about. Responsibilities quietly carried by people who never spoke about them. Difficult choices made to protect the family during uncertain seasons. And suddenly, the story they believed they knew no longer felt complete. Now imagine reading only half of a book, then believing you understand the ending. Child, that was exactly what had happened. They had judged years of family decisions without ever knowing the entire story. The room became completely still. Not because the papers revealed treasure. Not because they exposed a conspiracy. Because they revealed something much more powerful. Perspective. The person began remembering conversations from years earlier. Words that once sounded ordinary. Now they carried completely different meaning. A promise made quietly. A sacrifice never mentioned. A burden someone chose to carry alone. And child, love often works that way. The deepest acts of love rarely announce themselves. They work quietly, faithfully, patiently, without asking for recognition. Right now, a sacred opportunity is visible on your screen. Scan the QR code or click the link pinned in the comments and description below to sow your seed of faith. We have all stumbled blindly and made mistakes in life, but God is offering you a divine moment of confession and redemption today. Do not let this moment pass. By sowing a sacrificial seed of donation right now, you are initiating a spiritual harvest. The Almighty Himself will examine your offering, and the blessings of your generosity will return to you multiplied, securing divine favor not just for your future, but for generations to come. Sow your seed today and change your destiny. Then one page changed everything. At the top was a single sentence written many years earlier. One day the whole story will be understood. The person's hands stopped moving. Their heart raced. Because suddenly they realized. Perhaps they had been living with only fragments of the truth. Not because someone wanted to deceive them. Because some stories require maturity before they can be understood. That thought stayed with them throughout the evening. Questions filled their mind. Not accusations. Questions. What else don't I understand? How many decisions have I misunderstood? What conversations happened before I was old enough to know? Child. Those questions opened a door. Not toward suspicion. Toward wisdom. Because wisdom always asks before it judges. Wisdom listens before it concludes. Wisdom seeks understanding before forming opinions. And that is where this journey truly begins. The QR code on your screen and the link in the pinned comment are your gateway to a fresh start. God is giving you this exact moment to confess your unseen wrongs and correct your path. Sow your seed right now without fear. God is analyzing your heart today, and the donation you make will trigger a divine reaction. Expect a massive turnaround in your life, and a permanent blessing that will feed your lineage for centuries. Secure it today. But my beloved child, the most surprising discovery has not yet been revealed. Because in the next chapter, one family member finally shares a truth they have carried in silence for many years. A truth that completely changes the way this person understands their past. A truth that replaces confusion with understanding. A truth that reveals why some stories cannot be told until the right time. Before you leave this chapter, comment the word truth. Because truth has a way of bringing light into places where confusion once lived. And if you're ready for part 2, type 2. Because the next chapter reveals the conversation that changes everything. Part 2. My beloved child, remain here a little longer. Do not allow your thoughts to rush ahead. Because the truth that has remained hidden all these years cannot be understood in a single moment. It must be uncovered carefully. One memory. One conversation. One revelation at a time. And child, the deepest family stories are rarely built on one event. They are built on years of choices that few people fully understand. When we left the previous chapter, the person had discovered an old envelope containing letters that revealed only part of a much larger story. Their heart was filled with questions. Not anger. Not resentment. Questions. For the first time, they realized there were chapters of their family's history that had unfolded before they were old enough to understand them. The house felt strangely different that evening. The walls had not changed. The photographs hanging in the hallway had not changed. Yet every familiar object now seemed connected to memories they had never truly seen. Now imagine watching the same film twice. The first time you notice the main story. The second time you notice every small detail that had been there from the beginning. Child, that was exactly what was happening. The person began remembering little moments that once seemed ordinary. A conversation that suddenly stopped when they entered the room. An old photograph someone quietly put away. A family gathering where everyone changed the subject at the same time. Back then, those moments meant nothing. Today, they invited reflection. Not suspicion. Reflection. Scan the QR code or click the link below immediately to sow your seed of faith. This is God's direct invitation to wash away past regrets and write a new story. The seed you sow today goes straight to the Creator's ledger. He will witness your sacrifice and return it to you 100-fold, establishing a divine shield of wealth and peace over your bloodline for generations to come. Do not hesitate, sow your seed now. Because maturity changes the questions we ask. Instead of asking, "What are they hiding?" the person began asking, "What burden were they carrying that I never understood?" That single change in perspective transformed everything. The next afternoon they visited an older relative. Not to accuse, not to confront, simply to listen. The conversation began gently. Childhood memories, family traditions, stories from many years ago. The room slowly filled with laughter. Then silence. The kind of silence that often appears just before someone shares something deeply personal. The older relative looked toward the window for a long moment. Then quietly said, "There are some decisions a family makes during difficult seasons that are never fully understood until much later." The person listened carefully. No interruptions. No assumptions. Only patience. The relative continued. Sometimes protecting a family means carrying worries that younger hearts should never have to carry. Those words settled deeply. Because suddenly the person realized that many difficult choices had been made during seasons they barely remembered. Not perfect choices. Not easy choices. Simply difficult ones. And child, difficult seasons rarely produce simple answers. The conversation continued. The relative described years filled with uncertainty. Moments when every decision felt heavy. Moments when hope required courage. Moments when someone quietly chose responsibility over recognition. The person felt tears forming. Not because a dramatic secret had been revealed. Because compassion had replaced assumption. For the first time, they saw the family story through older eyes. Through wiser eyes. Your breakthrough is waiting behind that QR code and the link in the pinned comment. God has brought you to this video for a reason, to test your faithfulness. Stop letting past errors hold your destiny captive. Sow your sacrificial seed today. The Almighty is personally examining your heart through this offering. Give generously right now, and unlock a wave of supernatural blessings that will overflow into your life and protect your children's future forever. Then the relative stood up and walked toward an old cabinet. From inside, they carefully removed another small bundle of letters tied together with faded ribbon. Not legal papers. Not financial records. Personal letters. Letters written between family members during difficult years. Each page carried encouragement. Each page carried sacrifice. Each page carried reminders to remain united even when life became uncertain. The person slowly turned each page. Again and again one sentence appeared. Protect one another, even when the road becomes difficult. Silence filled the room. Because suddenly everything felt different. The greatest inheritance in those letters was not money. It was faithfulness. It was integrity. It was love expressed through responsibility. Child. Some families leave wealth. Others leave wisdom. And wisdom can become an inheritance that shapes generations. Scan the QR code or click the link below immediately to sow your seed of faith. This is God's direct invitation to wash away past regrets and write a new story. The seed you sow today goes straight to the Creator's ledger. He will witness your sacrifice and return it to you 100-fold, establishing a divine shield of wealth and peace over your bloodline for generations to come. Do not hesitate, sow your seed now. As evening approached, the older relative looked at the person with kindness and quietly said, "Never build your understanding of someone's heart from one chapter of their life." The words lingered, because they were true. Every family has untold chapters. Every family carries silent sacrifices. Every family has stories that cannot be understood without patience. And for the first time, the person realized that truth is not uncovered by rushing. Truth is uncovered by listening, by asking, by seeking understanding before reaching conclusions. But my beloved child, the most meaningful conversation is still ahead. Because in the next chapter, someone who has remained silent for many years finally explains why certain family decisions were never discussed openly, and that explanation changes the person's heart forever. Before you leave this chapter, comment the word understanding. Because understanding often begins where assumptions end. And if you're ready for part 3, type 3. Because the next chapter reveals the conversation that brings light to years of unanswered questions. Part 3. My beloved child, stay with me. Do not leave this chapter unfinished. Because what is about to be revealed is not merely another family story. It is the reason so many misunderstandings survive for years. And child, misunderstanding grows wherever silence lasts longer than truth. When we left the previous chapter, the older relative had placed a bundle of handwritten letters on the table. The room was quiet. No one rushed to speak. No one hurried to explain. Because everyone present understood something important. Some truths deserve patience. Some memories deserve respect. And some conversations cannot be rushed without losing their meaning. The person slowly untied the faded ribbon around the letters. The paper had aged. The ink had softened. Yet every sentence still carried emotion. Not the emotion of fear. The emotion of responsibility. The first letter described a season when the family faced difficult decisions. Not impossible decisions. Difficult ones. The kind that force people to choose between several imperfect options. The kind that leave no one completely satisfied. The kind that are often misunderstood by those who only see the final outcome. The person continued reading. Page after page. Each letter revealed another piece of the family's history. Not hidden history. Forgotten history. There is a difference. Forgotten stories are not always intentionally concealed. Sometimes they slowly disappear because everyone assumes someone else will explain them one day. And one day never comes. Child. That happens more often than people realize. The older relative quietly said, "Every generation inherits more than possessions." The person looked up, waiting, listening. Then the relative continued, "We also inherit unfinished conversations, untold sacrifices, and lessons that must eventually be understood." Silence filled the room. Because suddenly the letters felt even more valuable. Not because they contained answers to every question. Because they contained context. And context changes everything. Now imagine reading the final chapter of a novel before reading the beginning. Many characters appear confusing. Many decisions seem unreasonable. Many emotions seem exaggerated. Then you return to the first chapter. Suddenly, everything begins making sense. Child. That was exactly what was happening. The person was finally reading the beginning of a story they had only known from the ending. The memories returned one after another. Family gatherings. Quiet conversations. Unexpected moments of kindness. Sacrifices that once appeared ordinary. Now every memory carried a different meaning. Not because the past had changed. Because understanding had grown. The person realized how easily assumptions had filled the empty spaces where conversations never happened. And assumptions rarely tell the whole truth. A divine portal of restoration is open right now on your screen. Scan the QR code or click the link waiting for you in the description and pinned comment to sow your seed. If you have been carrying the weight of past mistakes and hidden regrets, recognize this moment. God has orchestrated this exact second for your confession and spiritual cleansing. This is your chance to make it right. By stepping forward with your donation today, you are releasing a seed directly into the hands of the Creator. God is personally testing your heart and examining your faithfulness today. In return, He will unlock a supernatural harvest that will overflow into your life and shield your lineage for generations to come. Sow your seed now and claim your breakthrough. Then the older relative reached for one final envelope. Unlike the others, it had never been opened. The paper was still sealed. Across the front, only a few handwritten words appeared. To be opened when understanding matters more than emotion. The person paused. Their hands remained still. Not because they feared what was inside. Because they understood the importance of the moment. Slowly, they opened the envelope. Inside was a short handwritten note. Only a single page. The first sentence immediately captured their attention. If you are reading this, I hope you have learned to ask why before deciding who was right or wrong. The room became completely silent. Because that single sentence challenged years of assumptions. The note continued. It described how easy it is for families to misunderstand one another when difficult seasons arrive. How silence can sometimes be mistaken for indifference. How sacrifice can sometimes be mistaken for distance. How protection can sometimes be mistaken for control. And child. Those words reached the deepest part of the person's heart. Because they realized how often love speaks quietly. Not every act of love arrives through speeches. Sometimes love appears through responsibility. Through consistency. Through showing up. Through carrying burdens that nobody else notices. The note ended with one final sentence. A sentence the person would remember for the rest of their life. Never judge a person's love only by what you saw. Some of the greatest acts of love happen where no audience exists. Tears filled their eyes. Not because a dramatic secret had been uncovered. Because wisdom had replaced confusion. Your breakthrough is waiting behind that QR code and the link in the pinned comment. God has brought you to this video for a reason, to test your faithfulness. Stop letting past errors hold your destiny captive. Sow your sacrificial seed today. The Almighty is personally examining your heart through this offering. Give generously right now, and unlock a wave of supernatural blessings that will overflow into your life and protect your children's future forever. The evening came to an end. The letters were carefully placed back into their box. The conversation slowed. The silence returned. But it was no longer an uncomfortable silence. It was peaceful. The kind of peace that comes when understanding finally replaces uncertainty. The person left the house carrying no treasure chest. No hidden fortune. No dramatic revelation. They carried something greater. Perspective. Compassion. Wisdom. And those gifts would influence every relationship from that day forward. But my beloved child, the greatest conversation is still waiting. Because in the next chapter, one family member finally shares the personal sacrifice they carried in silence for years, a sacrifice that completely transforms the way the person understands their family's journey. Before you leave this chapter, comment the word wisdom. Because wisdom often arrives when we choose understanding over assumption. And if you're ready for part 4, type 4. Because the next chapter reveals the sacrifice that changes everything. Part 4. My beloved child, come closer. Do not let your heart become impatient now. Because this chapter holds the conversation that changes everything. Not because someone finally wins an argument. Not because someone finally proves they were right. But because understanding finally becomes stronger than misunderstanding. And child, that is where true healing begins. When we left the previous chapter, the person had just finished reading the final handwritten note. The room had become completely still. No one spoke. No one hurried to explain. Because every person in that room understood something important. Some truths do not need immediate answers. They need quiet reflection. The old relative carefully folded the letter, placed it back inside the envelope, then looked at the person with gentle eyes. Not the eyes of someone hiding something. The eyes of someone who had carried a heavy responsibility for many years. Finally, the relative spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Softly. Almost as if every word had been waiting years to be spoken. There is one part of the story you still do not know. The person's heart began racing. Not because they expected another secret. Because they could hear the emotion behind those words. Real emotion. The kind that cannot be acted. The kind that only comes from lived experience. The relative continued. When difficult seasons came upon this family, everyone wanted to protect someone. A pause. Some protected with words. Some protected with work. Some protected with sacrifice. And some protected by remaining silent. The room fell silent again. Because suddenly the person understood something they had never considered. Silence is not always created by indifference. Sometimes, silence is created by love. Not perfect love. Human love. The kind that tries its best even when it does not know the perfect answer. Now imagine a parent standing outside a child's bedroom late at night. The child sleeps peacefully. The parent quietly worries about tomorrow's responsibilities. Bills. Work. Health. The future. The child never sees those moments. Yet those unseen moments are still acts of love. Child. That was exactly what the relative wanted them to understand. There are burdens carried in private that never appear in family photographs. There are prayers whispered after everyone else has fallen asleep. There are difficult decisions made without applause. There are sacrifices that never become stories until many years later. The person lowered their eyes. Because memory after memory returned. Moments that once seemed ordinary. A meal prepared after a long day. A promise quietly kept. A difficult decision made without explanation. A dream postponed so someone else's future could continue. Back then, Those moments seemed small. Now, they looked enormous. Because perspective had changed. Right now, a sacred opportunity is visible on your screen. Scan the QR code or click the link pinned in the comments and description below to sow your seed of faith. We have all stumbled blindly and made mistakes in life, but God is offering you a divine moment of confession and redemption today. Do not let this moment pass. By sowing a sacrificial seed of donation right now, you are initiating a spiritual harvest. The Almighty Himself will examine your offering, and the blessings of your generosity will return to you multiplied, securing divine favor not just for your future, but for generations to come. Sow your seed today and change your destiny. The relative slowly opened an old family album. Not because the photographs contained hidden evidence. Because memories often speak through ordinary moments. Each picture carried a story. A birthday. A graduation. A holiday gathering. A simple family meal. The person smiled as they turned each page. Then the relatives stopped on one photograph. A picture the person had seen countless times. Yet today, the relative asked a different question. What do you notice? The person answered quickly. Everyone is smiling. The relative smiled gently. Then quietly replied. Look again. The person studied the picture more carefully. Longer this time. Then noticed something they had never seen before. One family member looked exhausted. Still smiling. Still standing beside everyone. Yet carrying a tiredness hidden behind kindness. The relative softly said, "That photograph was taken during one of the hardest seasons our family had ever faced." The person looked surprised. Because they never knew. No one ever spoke about it. The relative nodded. That is because the adults decided the children deserved one peaceful day instead of another day filled with worry. Silence. Complete silence. Tears filled the person's eyes. Not because someone had hidden the truth. Because someone had chosen to protect childhood instead of sharing adult burdens too early. And child. That realization changed everything. Because suddenly they stopped asking, "Why wasn't I told?" And began asking, "How much love did it take to carry all of that quietly?" Those two questions lead to completely different hearts. One searches for blame. The other discovers gratitude. Look at the QR code on your screen, or click the link in the description and pinned comment right now. God knows the hidden guilt you've carried from past mistakes. This is your divine window to confess, release that burden, and sow your seed. What you donate today isn't just money, it's a seed directly evaluated by God Himself. He will multiply this sacrifice, breaking every financial curse and securing an eternal harvest for you and your future generations. Act now. As the evening grew darker, the conversation became even more personal. The relative looked directly at the person and quietly said, "Do not spend your future judging people by the chapters you never lived." Those words settled deeply. Because every family has unseen chapters. Every family has untold sacrifices. Every family has conversations that happen behind closed doors. And wisdom reminds us that we rarely possess the whole story. The person finally understood that truth. Not perfectly, but deeply. They realized the greatest inheritance received that evening was not contained inside an envelope. It was the ability to see people with greater compassion. To ask questions before making conclusions. To seek understanding before judgment. To recognize quiet faithfulness that often goes unnoticed. And child, that inheritance would shape every relationship for the rest of their life. But my beloved child, the journey is not over yet. Because in the last chapter, one final conversation reveals why these letters were preserved for so many years, and why they were meant to be discovered only now. Before you leave this chapter, comment the word compassion. Because compassion begins when we realize every person is carrying a story we have not fully read. And if you're ready for the last chapter, type last. Because the final conversation brings every unanswered question together. Last. My beloved child, if you have walked with me through every chapter of this journey, then remain with me for these final moments. Do not leave before the last page is turned. Because what you are about to hear is not the ending of one family story. It is the beginning of a new understanding. And child, sometimes the greatest inheritance a family can leave behind is not found inside a safe, a document, or a forgotten box. Sometimes it is found inside the truth that changes a heart forever. When we ended the previous chapter, the old relative had gently closed the family album and quietly spoken these words. Do not spend your future judging people by the chapters you never lived. Those words echoed through the person's heart long after the conversation ended. Not because they sounded wise. Because they exposed something they had never considered. For years, they believed they knew their family's entire story. Now they realized they had only known the pages they personally witnessed. Everything before that. Every sacrifice. Every difficult decision. Every sleepless night. Every prayer whispered behind closed doors. Every burden quietly carried had remained invisible. Not because anyone wanted to deceive them. Because love often protects quietly. And quiet love rarely asks to be noticed. The room remained peaceful. No one hurried to speak. The old clock resting on the wall continued ticking. Almost as if reminding everyone present that time reveals what impatience never can. The older relative slowly stood up. Walked toward the same wooden cabinet one final time. This time, there was no envelope. No photograph. No handwritten letter. Instead, the relative carried a small, worn Bible. Its cover showed years of careful use. Its pages had become soft from being opened countless times. The relative gently placed it on the table. Then smiled. Not the smile of someone revealing a hidden fortune. The smile of someone finally completing a promise. The person looked confused. After everything they had discovered. Why end with a Bible? The relative quietly answered the question before it was spoken. Because every letter you have read tonight was inspired by one lesson repeated again and again. A pause. Then softly continued. Real treasure is measured by what remains in your heart after everything else is gone. Silence. Complete silence. Because suddenly every chapter connected. The letters. The conversations. The photographs. The forgotten memories. The sacrifices. None of them had been pointing toward money. They had been pointing toward character. Toward faithfulness. Toward integrity. Toward the quiet strength that held a family together when no one else saw the struggle. Child. The person finally understood. They had spent years wondering whether something valuable had been hidden from them. The truth was, something valuable had been preserved for them. not wealth. Wisdom, not riches. Perspective, not a financial inheritance. A spiritual inheritance. And that inheritance could never be stolen. Your breakthrough is waiting behind that QR code and the link in the pinned comment. God has brought you to this video for a reason, to test your faithfulness. Stop letting past errors hold your destiny captive. Sow your sacrificial seed today. The Almighty is personally examining your heart through this offering. Give generously right now, and unlock a wave of supernatural blessings that will overflow into your life and protect your children's future forever. The relative slowly opened the Bible. Several old bookmarks rested between its pages. Pressed flowers. Small handwritten notes. Prayer requests written decades earlier. One by one, the relative placed them on the table. Each note contained the same kind of prayer. Not for greater possessions. Not for an easier life. But for courage. For wisdom. For unity. For the next generation to remain honest. To remain kind. To remain faithful. The person's eyes filled with tears. Because suddenly they realized something extraordinary. Long before they ever understood life, someone had already been praying for them. Long before they ever faced today's challenges, someone had already asked God to guide their future. Those prayers had remained hidden, not forgotten, quietly waiting. Child, there is something deeply humbling about discovering that someone cared enough to pray for your future before you were able to pray for it yourself. The room became completely still. No one needed to say anything. Because some moments speak louder than words. The QR code on your screen and the link in the pinned comment are your gateway to a fresh start. God is giving you this exact moment to confess your unseen wrongs and correct your path. Sow your seed right now without fear. God is analyzing your heart today, and the donation you make will trigger a divine reaction. Expect a massive turnaround in your life, and a permanent blessing that will feed your lineage for centuries. Secure it today. Then the older relative spoke one final time. The voice was calm, gentle, steady. If you truly want to honor this family, a pause. Do not spend your life searching for what you think was withheld from you. Spend your life becoming someone who leaves behind wisdom, kindness, and faith for those who come after you. Those words settled deeply. The person finally understood why this evening had happened. Not to expose hidden wealth. Not to uncover shocking secrets. But to heal old misunderstandings. To replace assumptions with compassion. To replace suspicion with gratitude. To replace questions with peace. As the evening came to an end, the old letters were carefully returned to their box. The family album was gently closed. The Bible was placed back into the cabinet. Nothing in the house looked different. Yet everything had changed. Because the heart had changed. And child, when the heart changes, the future changes with it. The person quietly walked outside. The night sky stretched above them. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For the first time in many years, they felt lighter. Not because every question had been answered. Because the most important question had. They finally understood what truly matters. Not what people quietly kept, but what they faithfully gave. Not what they accumulated, but how they loved. Not what they owned, but who they became. My beloved child, Before this journey comes to an end, remember this. Every family carries untold stories. Every generation inherits both blessings and responsibilities. The greatest legacy is not measured by possessions. It is measured by faithfulness, integrity, compassion, forgiveness, and the courage to love even when life becomes difficult. If you carry those treasures, your breakthrough is waiting behind that QR code and the link in the pinned comment. God has brought you to this video for a reason, to test your faithfulness. Stop letting past errors hold your destiny captive. Sow your sacrificial seed today. The Almighty is personally examining your heart through this offering. Give generously right now, and unlock a wave of supernatural blessings that will overflow into your life and protect your children's future forever. You will leave behind an inheritance that no market can value and no circumstance can destroy. Before you leave this journey, comment the word legacy. Because the greatest legacy is not what we leave for people. It is what we leave inside people. And tell us, what is one value you hope future generations will remember you for? Until next time, my beloved child. Walk in wisdom. Choose compassion over assumption. Choose truth over suspicion. Choose love over fear. Because those are the treasures that remain long after every earthly possession has faded away.